Welcome to From Barriers to Breakthroughs, the podcast that helps you create the life, business, and love you truly want. Not with silver bullets or magical pills, but by removing what's actually holding you back. Here's what nobody tells you about getting unstuck. It has nothing to do with what you know, but it has everything to do with that switch within that allows you to turn that knowledge into action. We'll explore powerful stories, breakthrough research, and game-changing strategies so you can finally break through and thrive. Your breakthrough begins now. Welcome to another episode of From Barriers to Breakthroughs. I am your host, Rebecca Mountain, and today we're going to be talking about mean girls and toxic bros. I wanted to make sure that I had the male equivalent of mean girls. And when I looked it up, there's some pretty interesting things. So toxic bros is what I'm going to go with for now. I think you get the idea. When it comes to success, 85% of it comes from our mindsets. And our mindset is contrived of two major areas. There's lots that goes into it, but when you break it down to the two most major aspects that go into mindset, it's what we feel and what we think. And what we think can actually drive what we feel. So when you look at which one of those two muscles are bigger, it's going to be our thoughts. Now, an interesting formula when it comes to understanding how we behave is that what we feel and what we think become what we do. It's my life mission to help people overcome the whole, I know what I should be doing, but I'm not doing it problem. It has been around for thousands of years, so this is not a new problem. And yet there's a very simple solution, or at least it sounds simple. It's a simple equation. Right? It's the most simple algebra out there, A plus B equals C. And so today what I want to focus on is the thinking part of that equation, particularly on the mean side of what's inside our heads. So as growing up in the cult that I grew up in and then leaving it thereafter, there was always a voice in my head. That voice didn't stop just because I left the cult. It was actually one of the reasons why I struggled so much in the years since I have left, since the rollover of my car on March 17, 2008. And these thoughts were very much a direct contributor into me stopping myself from being able to achieve what it is I wanted to achieve, right? With my social media agency, I would get always so incredibly close to $1 million. But right before I could hit it, I always did something strange and I never really understood why. I would fail to return phone calls that I knew would give me the income that would drive that number up. Not that everyone should have a money goal, but let's just say that's the one I was rolling with at the time. Or I would fail out on a client relationship. I just wouldn't maintain it properly and they would go. So then, of course, my income would drop. And every time I approached that seven figure, that mean girl in my head said, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? And with those kind of voices in my head, and more importantly, me focusing on those voices in my head, I would behave in a way that was actually counter to what I wanted. And when you think about it, you're like, what? We have dreams. Why would we try to sabotage our ability to get what we want? The bigger the dream, the bigger the chance for self-sabotage. Because imagine if you have if you dream like super big, you're like, oh my God, wouldn't that be amazing to be able to achieve that? It's going to blow out of your comfort zone. And Gay Hendricks wrote a book called The Big Leap. And in it, he talks about upper limit syndrome, which is the outer banks of the stratosphere of where your brain and your body, the two are just sort of, it's all super interconnected, but those are the outer banks of what it is said. This is familiar. This is safe. And whenever you try to exit the barriers of those outer banks, your brain goes into freak out mode and you will do things that seem really strange. You'll say things, you're like, where did that come from? Or things will happen around you that you will take as indicators that you need to pull back, right? Say you get into an accident. I could have taken my rollover as proof that I needed to pull back and stay. Instead, I took that really super scary approach of, if I am having this happen to me, perhaps this is an indication that I gotta go. And so there's two ways that we can interpret such types of accidents or illness where they happen to us or they happen to others. And it's up to you and the level of your bravery on how much you can interpret those signs as proof that you are now hitting the outer edges of your comfort zone. Because when I rolled that car, I was thinking of leaving, and that was absolutely terrifying. And my brain was freaking out day after day after day. And so if you can hang on beyond those sort of, I call them vibrations, almost like those accidents, those really 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 loud thoughts, that mean girl, that toxic dude in your head, as you get closer and closer to achieving or getting close or doing things to achieve your dreams that maybe you haven't done before, maybe you're not too confident about, or it's just new, those voices get louder and louder and louder. And gets your brain gets real creative. We are incredibly smart creatures, that it doesn't always work for us. Sometimes it works against us. And so when you are trying to do something great, and hopefully when you're listening to this podcast, you are trying to do something great. And something great could be just consistently getting out of bed at the same time every day. It could be maybe having one extra healthy snack in your day so that you can move toward healthier living. It could be that you want to go for a walk. I know some people that they struggle with their either their mental health or their physical health, or they don't have access to, say, a sidewalk. They live in the country, and I'm like, okay, well, just walk around your house, right? Put on some good tunes, or just, if you're listening to the wind in the trees and that brings you peace and calm, go ahead and do that. There's always these tiny things we can do. So, as you do bigger and bigger things that will push you further and further out of what's familiar, again, that mean girl, toxic dude in your head is going to become exceptionally creative and inventive on creating these pictures of absolute catastrophe. So let's say one of the big things you want to do is you want to make consistent phone calls. I love picking on the phone because so many people don't want to do it. They just catastrophize as to what's going to happen when they actually pick up this cool little device that we all have. And so, if you go say, okay, I'm going to do this, and you map out, say, a script, and maybe you practice it with a friend, or you practice it in front of the mirror, and you're okay, like, I'm going to go pick it up. As you go through the motion of picking that up, your brain is going to go into hyperdrive, and it's going to be like, remember what could happen. Remember the last time you did this? Remember what's happened to so-and-so? Mary, when she called somebody, like, oh my God, it was bad. And you don't want that to happen to you, and you'll feel like an idiot. And it'll paint this really horrifying picture. If you don't have a strategy to counteract that voice, that mean girl, that toxic bro in your head, you're going to pull back, retract your hand. And typically, which is really interesting, when you retract, okay, so again, like we're talking about the phone, but think about whatever you want to do and you're not doing it. When you retract from that, you often go and then do something that's really, really comforting, right? So I think I talked about this in a previous podcast where you either will go and do the laundry, or you'll reorganize your desk, or you'll do some social doom scrolling, like whatever it is, because you're trying to calm yourself back down. So when in my travels through figuring out how people can overcome the volume and the reaction that we have to this mean girl and toxicity in our head, what are some of the things you can do? And there's some really, really neat stuff. I'm just looking at some notes here. First of all, what is most important is trying to understand the main cause, like what's the main driver to the behavior that you're pulling it. Like, so I love to get people to just grab a piece of paper and just write down, like, what are called automatic thoughts, right? So what are the automatic thoughts that are coming into your head? And I find those easier to start with. So you will need to write down the emotions, like what you're actually feeling, but that's a tough place to start. So start with, what are you thinking? So you go to reach for the phone, or you go to have that meeting, or you go to have that conversation, or launch that thing, whatever it is, and you pull back. What are you thinking? And just write out all the things that you're scared of. I'm reading a book right now called Dialed In by Dr. Dana Sinclair, and she calls it like your freakouts. What are your freakouts? And you write down all the things that are freaking you out. I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of flubbing the call. I'm afraid of sounding like an idiot. I'm afraid they're going to say no. I'm afraid they're going to say no and then tell all their friends how dumb I am. Right. So write down every single thought that you have that is contributing to the retraction, to the changing of the behavior. Then what you can do is you simply go through those and you do one of two things, or you can do both. First of all, is there a pattern? And often what happens is, like, say the pattern for the phone is that I'm afraid of, coming across salesy, right? So it's how others perceive you. When you look at all of your freakouts or the thoughts you have about freaking out, when you look at them, you're like, okay, really what I'm afraid of is I'm afraid of coming across as salesy, or as pitchy, or like just not sincere, like I'm begging, like I want something. And so you're not really worried about you, you're worried about somebody else. Now, the wonderful and horrible thing about humanity is that we are always afraid of what other people think or say or do in response to us. And yet we are categorically the worst at predicting human behavior, like truly the worst. Like I always joke that, the weatherman gets a really rough go because he's trying to predict something that is crazy and unpredictable. And as the climate changes, becomes even more so. Imagine we're worse. Imagine we just look up into the sky at any given point in the day and we're trying to predict the rest of the weather for the rest of the day with no information. Okay. That's how bad we are as human beings at trying to predict what other people are going to say, do, or think because of what we say or do. So the first thing is to understand, is it reasonable to have this particular fear? Is it realistic that you could alter what other people feel, think, or do because of what you say? And the answer is absolutely not. You cannot affect anybody. They're going to do what they're going to do no matter what you do. So the first thing is, again, when you're looking at that, is can you release yourself from the responsibility of the outcome? You have no responsibility, no accountability for what other people think, feel, or do. Okay. So the first thing, cool, I can't do anything about that, which is going to lead us to the actual solution. What can you do? And I find that one question is the biggest anxiety killer that I've ever used for myself. I can get myself pretty riled up about anything, the market, my business, my kids, right? There's lots of things that I can get into catastrophic thinking, right? My youngest is going to college for the first time in a week and 3 days, not that I'm counting. And I'm just like, I've just got so many feelings about this. And those feelings can also come with some wonderful catastrophic thoughts. And so, is it realistic what you're thinking? So look through your freak out list. Is it realistic? Or is it a little bit imaginary? And so that's one way for you to then, okay, I'm not responsible for it. But that's not going to be enough for you. You're going to be like, okay, well, so some people can go off and that's enough, but most people need to go to the next step, which is, what can I do about those catastrophic fears that I control? And this is absolutely 1,000% the key for overcoming your mean girl or the toxic bro in your head, because they're going to start feeding you stories about all the things that are out there. And usually it's the things you can't control. It's those what if scenarios that drive you into the ground when it comes to behavior. So you look at it, like the major pattern or the loudest thought is that you don't want to be coming across as salesy, pitchy, or inauthentic. What can you do? Well, look at it as, how do you want to come across? Well, I want to come across as helpful. Okay, well, what would a helpful conversation sound like? What would you say to somebody if you were being helpful? So if you're picking up the phone to talk to a client or a prospect, think about, how can you help that person? So say you're calling Steve. What was your last conversation with Steve like? What do you know about Steve? What do you think Steve would find really, really helpful right now in his life? And you make some notes. Oh, you know what? Like, yeah, Steve's here and he's got this problem, or I should find out if that's still a problem. You know what? Maybe before I can be helpful, I need to know, what do I need to be helpful about? So I need to know more about Steve. Oh, that's something I can do. What are some really great questions that I can ask Steve? Maybe one really solid question. I'm just going to ask him a question. That's it. That's the conversation. I'm going to tell him, you know what? Thank you so much. I'm going to go get some information. and I'm going to bring it back to you. And so you'll start bringing control back over onto your side of the fence, the one you actually can do something about. And now your anxiety starts to go down, because anxiety and action cannot exist in the same room. They cannot. And so if you stew in your anxiety, if you focus on that loud, obnoxious, toxic, horrible, condescending, perception destroying voice of the mean girl and toxic bro in your head, it will just make it louder and louder and louder, because you are giving it everything it wants. If you starve out that voice and just kind of go, yeah, I'm not listening to you. You can't just say, I'm not listening to you, la, 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 not listening. It's your brain. Okay. It's really, really tough, because your brain's just going to wait you out until you stop, pretending to plug your ears, and then comes back on full bore. You have to give your brain something else to do. And that is using your thinking brain. So getting out of the emotional brain into that thinking brain, and then moving towards action. Because remember, your thoughts can change how you feel. So if you feel overwhelmed and stressed because you're listening to that nasty voice in your head, and you replace it with, okay, what am I going to do? And now you're starting to feel in control. You're starting to feel confident. You're starting to feel hopeful, capable, and willing, and powerful, and happy. Now that mean girl, they don't have any space, because you can't think more than one thought at a time. You can't. It's impossible. Some people think you can multitask, but you cannot multi-focus, and multitasking ruins you anyway. But you know what? So if you have the understanding that I can only think one thought at a time, so what thought is it going to be? Are you going to give the thought over to your nasty girl? Are you going to give it over to that toxic voice in your head, that belligerent bully that wants to tell you that you're not worth anything? It's never going to work. No one's going to listen to you. Who the heck do you think you are? Or are you going to flip over to the other side, where you're focusing a little bit more on, I can do this. This is clearer to me. If I do this, then I'm going to actually deliver on what I'm actually striving to be. And when you remove the obstacle, remove the barrier, imagine your reaction, or imagine your behavior. So behavior number one is, you're going to pick up the phone and you have this catastrophic thinking. I'm like, oh my God, all these bad things are going to happen. Your phone's lava. It's gone. Poof. You're not going to touch it. If, however, you're like, oh, you know what? I think Steve the last time I talked to Steve, he seemed really worried. I wonder how he's doing. You pick up the phone because you care, and you just, hey, Steve, how's it going? I was thinking about you today. You don't hesitate, right? There's no barrier between you and this beautiful little device that can really, really help. And so when you're looking at what something like you're trying to do today, and that's a really great exercise when you're listening to these podcasts, right? So what is it I'm trying to do today? Or maybe you've been kicking the can on something and you've been trying to get it done for a long time. You meaning to get to it. You're going to, you hope to, you want to, you need to, you should, you're shooting all over the place, right? So think of that thing and then do that. Okay, what are your freakouts? When you go to do it but stop, what goes through that beautiful brain of yours? And write down as many as you can. Look for either what's loudest, look for what is most prevalent, look for a pattern. And go, okay, if that is the pattern, what's something I can do? What do I actually need? If I'm afraid of being salesy, what's the opposite of salesy? If you hate getting sales calls, but you need to make a sales call, okay, that's often one of the biggest problems. People don't make calls. They're like, well, I hate getting calls. Okay, but what's a call that you want? What's a call that you'd appreciate? I'll give you an example and then we'll wrap up this episode. So I live in Canada and we have a telephone company called Rogers. And so Rogers calls me and they're just going on and on. And I know it's a script and I'm like, I ain't got time for this. So I've been waiting for them to stop talking because I'm a polite Canadian. And I'm just like, no, thank you. Not for me. Click, gone. Don't even think about it. I hate those calls. Those are really, really annoying. Rogers called me this other day and this person was not using a script, or it didn't sound like they were using a script, first of all. So was the first reason I listened. And the second thing they did is they said, do you know you're paying too much for your phone plan? And I'm like, say what now? You think I wanted to hang up that phone? No. And I listened to them and I'm like, no, what? Where is this coming from? And they had just done a little analysis, right? Because that's what companies can do. And they realized that for what I was using, I was overpaying. Would I like to pay less? Yeah, I would like to pay a lot less. I will take that call every single day. So what kind of call do you want to make? What kind of action do you want to take? Which one of those two sides of the coin do you think you can be on? Sure, we can all be on the, catastrophic thinking, this isn't going to work. I'm going to go eat worms and book out and not do anything. And you can tell yourself for a time that that's okay. It's fine. It's good enough. But I will absolutely tell you there is an end date for that thinking. And then you're going to feel one of two things: regret or frustration. And hopefully you don't do that for too long, that you are actually out of time. If you catch it soon enough and you decide, no, it's not fine and it's not okay and it's not good enough and what the heck, then you can flip over to the other side. And if that's where you want to be, I'm just giving you the strategy to go from hesitating, from procrastinating, and from being a perfectionist, which is a pretty way of saying you're afraid to launch. If you've decided that you don't want to do that anymore, you've decided on something, whether it's big or small, and you are sick of not doing it, you are sick of not, taking even a small step towards achieving it, your thoughts are going to be one of the biggest barriers in your way. So grab a pen, at the end of this episode, write down your thoughts, look for the patterns, look for what's loudest. What can you do? Because remember, whatever negative, nasty thoughts you've got coming on this side literally has to be put on pause if you're going to listen to something else, something more self-affirming, something more maybe self-compassionate, more self-leadership, right? So those are the kinds of things. So if you fill your time and your brain space with more of the thoughts that are going to feed that greatest sense of you, then there won't be any time or space for the nasty person in your head. And over time, if you practice this regularly, you will find that voice gets quieter and quieter and quieter. Now, it'll flare once you get back out to the outer edges of your comfort zone, if you continue to take steps forward. So don't expect that nasty voice, that mean girl, that toxic bro. They're going to be there. They're not going away. But now you have a methodology to say, okay, I hear you. Thanks, but I'm not listening to you today. So give that a go. Thanks for joining me on this wonderful podcast. Of course, you can subscribe and so you can get episodes all the time. You can follow me at Bex Mountain on all of my socials, and would love to have a conversation with you. And until next time, this is Rebecca Mountain signing off from the From Barriers to Breakthroughs podcast, and I'm wishing you the most amazing day. And there you have it, another step closer to removing what's been blocking your path. Remember, you already have everything you need inside you. Sometimes it just takes finding that one domino that's been holding back the rest. If today's episode helped you identify even one barrier you're ready to remove, then we're making some serious progress. To keep the breakthroughs coming, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and visit rebeccamountain.ca for additional resources to help you bridge that gap between knowing and doing. This is Rebecca, and you've been listening to From Barriers to Breakthroughs.